koutou, ko diaho, haramai, thanks for joining us. We're here for Waipa District Library's Get Active program, and today we are talking running. Joining me is Jonny McKee from Align Health. Kia ora, Jonny.
Kia ora, Dee, how are you?
Well, thank you. Now, Align Health, the clinic has changed names. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yep. So I'm based in Align Health, mainly in Cambridge on Alpha Street. So up until that time, we had 3 different clinics. We had the Cambridge Community and Sports Physio in Alpha Street. We also had Leamington Physiotherapy on Shakespeare Street, and we also had Anglesey Physiotherapy in Hamilton. And on top of that, we also had a hand therapy clinic based in Mollinsville and 2 small hand therapy clinics based in Tiamutu. With all those different centres all under different names, and as well as having physiotherapists and occupational therapists who work in the hand therapy specialty. We want to try to bring all those different types of professions and clinicians and all those different locations into one area. So we thought we'd align everything, and that's why the name Align Health has come about. So that's been a year-long process trying to come up with different brands and different names, and we've come up with Align Health. We're aligning all our different services and different locations in one name.
Okay, fantastic. And of course, Jonny, you are a runner and you run for Cambridge Athletic Club, as do I. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Jonny has the Park Run Cambridge record, which I can't remember what number that is. It's 16 minutes something.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if I can remember what it is, but I think it's 1 second faster than somebody else. That's all that matters.
And we're not quite sure, but you might also have the Waipa Fun Run record as well.
I think so, yes. Yeah, I think that might be right. But
yeah, so you're definitely the man to talk to about running.
I hope so, yeah. I've been involved with running for as long as I can remember, so it's kind of my go-to thing. So
I'm going to ask you why we love running so much once we actually get into it, but I managed to find this book that we've got new to the library, and it's called I Hate Running and You Can Too.
Yeah,
it is very tongue-in-cheek, very cute book for people who are starting out. So Jonny, why do we love running so much?
I think I like running because of the simplicity of it. I mean, it doesn't take very much effort to get up and go for a run. And I think since I've grown up, I've always been involved more in athletics as an overall sport, not just running. So I was brought up in track and field and throws and jumps as well. And I think if you're involved with that sport, it's kind of one sport for everybody. It sort of meets people that are very, very fast and people that like the longer endurance stuff, plus the very powerful people and the very tall and the very short. So it's one of those sports that kind of gives everybody a bit of a go, and really good for kids, I think, especially starting off. Because you can learn lots of different run, jump, and throw fundamental skills. But for me, running on its own, especially distance running, is that thing that I like to do on my own. And you can get out and get away from things. It's good stress relief. It keeps you really fit. But it also gives you the opportunity to join clubs and enjoy that social side of things, which I think Cambridge Harriet has got really, really a good profile there in that sort of space. And you can be as competitive or as fun-loving as you want, basically. So it's just that sort of scope, I think, is why I like running.
Yeah. I mean, I'm more in the fun-loving, but the thing is, as you do it more and you get better, you certainly become a little bit more competitive along the way. But certainly, speaking from our club perspective, we've got a variety of ages and abilities as well, and we welcome everyone that would even want to start.
Yeah, it's a friendly atmosphere, and it's something everybody can do. I think that some people think running's a bit of a barrier and something they can't do, but I think it's just about how you go about it and just getting the right advice to meet the goals that you want to set.
Yeah. Now, we've heard it all before. Consult your physio before starting something.
Yeah.
Why should we come and see a physio before we start running, or even after we've been running for a little while?
Yeah, so I think if you're going to start on some sort of goal for running or a running program, I think it doesn't matter whether you're an elite person or somebody's just starting off for the first time or somebody that does get injured a lot. I think going to see a physio is a really key starting point, because there is a lot of information out there. If you go on social media or internet sites or running magazines, or even just speaking to your your friends or your other runners that you run with, you're going to find lots of different information and different things that work for one person, but not necessarily for somebody else. And there's lots of different trends, things become popular at different times. So I think if you go to see a physio, you're going to see a health profession, especially somebody that's involved with running and has an interest in that area. And they're going to be very up to speed on what works across the board. And the most important thing, they're going to assess you and work out what's right for you, because we can tell everybody to do the same thing and we're not going to get the same results. So we need to basically try to find ways of tailoring what we say to people and what we give them to do, and make that sort of fit their particular needs. So the important thing is assessing them, especially for those people that are very sedentary or very new to running, or don't have much of a background. They need a lot of advice, and that pre-participation in medical screening is very important. So that's something physios do have a lot of background in, because our day-to-day work, when we see people with sore backs and sore necks and sore knees, we are doing medical screens to work out whether there's some sort of underlying medical problem that's more of a medical emergency or needs to be medically screened. So that's part of what we normally do. But if it's all about exercise levels and getting into cardiovascular exercise, we need to work out whether that person is actually fit enough to start. So if you've got some sort of unstable heart problem, angina, blood pressure problem that's never been assessed for by a doctor, we will recognize that and we'll refer you back to doctors before you even start your exercise. But based on the fact that we know to look out for things like family history of cardiac problems, looking for medications you're on which are affecting your blood pressure, your cholesterol, any family history of things like diabetes, or even just being overweight or underweight, those sort of things, we screen for those, and we work out if those things are going to allow you to exercise at the level you want, or whether we have to make sure you start off gently. And sometimes you have to kind of get fit before you start running. So maybe running straight away might not be the right thing for you. It might be just walking or some other exercise that lays way to get some sort of baseline fitness and strength before you actually start running. Right. And then if you start running, it could be short, slow, it could be walk jogs. So those are all things we sort of consider at the start.
Yeah, sometimes it's small steps, isn't it?
Very much so, yeah. It's a long journey. It's not a sprint. It's usually a marathon. That sort of philosophy is very, very important.
Yeah, and you definitely wouldn't want to get into sprinting as the first thing you can do. No. Trust me.
Not at all. No.
Okay, what about flexibility and posture? Is that something that you also look at? Because I've kind of read that poor posture can be kind of create, less running efficiency and create problems if you're out running.
Yeah. So even that general term posture, if you look at somebody just sitting and they have that sort of bad posture where they're flexed forward compared to somebody that's more upright, that in itself will cause a change in the amount of air you get in and out of your lungs. So if you're running hunched over compared to somebody running upright, you're going to get more chest expansion, you're going to get better diaphragm movement, and you're going to get more air in. So if you're not getting enough air in, it might only be a small change in that. That's going to make a big difference to your running efficiency. Plus, generally speaking, when you run tall and run upright, you're going to run a lot more efficiently. That's something we'll always look for. Do you have the range of motion in your spine to actually attain an upright position? And do you have the muscle strength to maintain that during a run? So often you see people starting off running well, and then as they get fatigued, they tend to slip forwards. And that's just a lack of muscle strength and endurance in the trunk. So we can screen for that. And sometimes you need to make your spine more flexible, so we can often prescribe exercises to help that. But then when you look at running gait as a whole, that in itself, the whole our talk, it's things like the way you land, the number of steps you take, and whether you land on your heel or the forefoot, all those different things. We can look at that and often we video that so the person can see how they run, because quite often the way you think you run and the way you actually run aren't necessarily the same things. So we often look for those sort of things. But without assessing somebody, if I was going to give somebody one thing to do when they run, I would just say run tall. Forget about trying to run on your toes or on your heels unless you've been screened for it, or trying to run faster or slower or bigger steps. If you just run tall, that in itself kind of gives a chain reaction of other things which are more beneficial for your running.
Great, run tall. Pretty difficult when you're only 5 foot as I am, but I will attempt to run tall, Jonny. Okay, can we move on to stretching? So we all hear about this dynamic stretching and, stretching before, as part of your warm up before you go out on a run. But I'm going to give you a scenario here. So you've only got 30 minutes and you want to go out for a run. Do we spend 5 minutes warming up, run for 20 and cool down for 5, or what do we do?
Yeah, so I think the key thing is, well, but runners probably have a very bad habit. If you've got 30 minutes, you want to make every minute count from running, but you want to run every minute you can, and that's like a pitfall we often fall into. You want to maximize your time running. I think the key word, the key term is the warm up. So warming up doesn't mean you have to stretch, whether it's statically or dynamically. You just have to prepare your body for running. So quite often it's just as simple as either just start off with a walk and then gradually increase your speed if you're quite new to it for the first couple of minutes. So the first 5 minutes could be walk jogging, slowly jogging, and build up into your normal speed. Or if you're more used to running, you could just go easy for the first 5 minutes, and then once you're ready and you feel all your aches and pains and all your stiffnesses are loosened out, then you can get back into your running. And then when you get that last 5 minutes, just gradually decrease the speed again, and that's usually good for most problems. If you've got the time, you can spend a bit of extra time doing dynamic stretches, things like lunges and squats and calf raises and some sort of heel flex and running drills. Those sort of things are definitely more beneficial if you've got the time. They're not essential. If you do have time outside of your running program to do those things, that's also helpful. But I guess it's more important for some people and less important for others. And that's why if you've got a screening process beforehand, we can work that out whether you need to do that more than somebody else might.
Okay. And what about static stretching and doing that day to day? What role does that have a role? And if so, what role can that help with us with our running?
Yeah, so some people love stretching. They feel it really helps them. And there's probably nothing wrong with doing static stretches. That's the long holds for maybe 30 seconds. If you just finish your run and everything feels a bit stiff and sore, or the next day you feel a bit stiff and sore, you might get some relief out of doing stretching, and that's fine. And if you do have short muscles which are affecting your ability to run a certain way, then sometimes static stretching is applicable. The problem is some people are very flexible, have got lots of range of motion, and therefore they don't need to stretch. So what you have to think about whenever you're running, all the force and all the energy is happening whenever you land on one leg. Basically running is a series of repetitive springs from one foot to the other. So you want your muscles and your tendons and your whole leg to be basically an elastic recoil action. So if you've got too flexible a muscle and too flexible a joint, sometimes you end up being too loose and not having a nice rebound action. At the same thing, you're also going to be, if people are quite stiff, so they don't absorb any shock at all. So if you're very stiff, then stretching might help you. But if you are very flexible, then there's probably not much extra benefit to gain from doing lots of stretching. In fact, it might actually be detrimental for you. So that's why I have to work that out. So I've actually seen a lot of people that are very flexible, yet they want to stretch all the time because they constantly feel tense and tight. And sometimes that's not because they're short, that's just because their muscles are weak and fatiguing and they don't have the endurance. So they all feel this tense, tight sensation, but it's because something's weak. So actually strengthening those people is probably more effective than stretching. So stretching at its place, it's just trying to know when and where that is, and that's the difficult thing to work out sometimes.
Okay, great. So you mentioned strength. So strength training, how important is it for a runner? And I've worked this out for myself as well, which is great.
Yeah, no, it's really important. I think historically runners tend to think of strengthening as something people do in the gym, and it results in becoming very big and bulky and very heavy, and therefore we want to stay away from that. But essentially, from a running injury perspective, you're trying to make the tissue in your body, whether that's the bone, the joints, the tendons, the muscle, you want to make them as resilient to load as possible. If you keep stressing the same structure over and over and over again, 10,000 steps during a run with 3 times your body weight, if that tissue is strong, it's going to be a lot more durable than weak tissue. So that's what you're trying to get out of strength. And that probably becomes more important as well as you get older. So think in your 20s and 30s, you're young and healthy and everything's going really well, and you sort of hit your master's levels. And over 35, over 40, your muscle mass will gradually decrease over time. I think that's probably when it's even more important to start doing more strengthening and putting more load in your body. And the benefits have been shown a little bit in injuries, but even more so in performance. So it's very hard to prove it helps injuries, but it makes perfect sense that it does. But it's actually been shown to really improve efficiency of running and improve running performance. There's actually more evidence for that. So it's definitely something runners should start doing more of. And you might get the odd person that is very strong and therefore there's no extra benefits. That's why again you want to be screening people and working out where the weakest link is. There could be flexibility for one person and strength for somebody else. But if I had 30 minutes to spend once a week, I'd go to the gym or do some exercise at home that work on strength. And there's certain exercises you can do, like squats, where you work through your whole range of motion. So you might get the benefit of getting good range of motion and good strength at the same time. So you get more bang from your buck with certain exercises.
Okay, cool. So we said that running is one of the easiest things that you can get into, because let's face it, basically you just need some sportswear and a pair of running shoes. So we'll move on to footwear. And I know this is something that I've talked to you about before. So there's a multitude of shoes out there on the market. How can we choose what's right for us? And what are the pitfalls of some of these new shoes?
So it's easier to talk about the pitfalls than it is to say how you pick the right shoe. So the main problems people get with running is, if you're not a runner, sometimes you're running in shoes which aren't running shoes. You're running in your netball shoes, or shoes that are more appropriate for the gym. So first of all, that's one thing: get running shoes, not other types of shoes. But there's so many to choose from. Key thing is making sure they fit well and they're comfortable. You'd be surprised how many people come in and they've got very narrow shoes, but they've got very, very wide feet. And probably the key thing is, I don't think people realize how quickly the running shoes wear out. So they do reckon that somewhere between 500 and 800 kilometers is about the average for a shoe. And for some people, that's a couple of months. For some people, that might be 6 months to a year. But you need to look for signs. If you can look at the bottom of your shoe and they're wearing away and the tread on the sole's gone, well, they're well past their use-by date. If there's holes coming into your shoes, and if there's lots of wear and tear signs on the side of the shoes, then you know you need to replace them. There's a lot of research about rotating your shoes. So instead of just having one pair and using that until it's finished, if you change your shoes mid-cycle, midway through their course of use, and have two pairs on the go at once, that's been shown to have a massive effect on preventing injury as well. Is there a right type of shoe for each person? Well, yes and no. It really depends on being assessed properly, and probably the people that run the good shoe shops are the people to speak to. If you go into the big sports shops, there's probably nobody helping you pick the shoe. So if you go into some of the shoe clinic, Smith sports shoes, there's definitely people there with a lot more knowledge about shoes than anybody else. There has been research where they sort of looked at people's feet and tried to work out what type of foot they've got, and then put them into the appropriate shoe. And they've found that never actually really helps injuries. And that's not unexpected, because there's so many reasons why you can get injured that we don't expect one thing to be a miracle cure. So I think the key thing is, if you already have a shoe that you like and you're not getting injured, well, stick with it. Unless you're trying to get faster, in which case take that shoe that you've got and try to get one that's just a tiny bit lighter, okay? Not different type of brand, just something that's a little bit lighter than that. And as you get lighter, you get faster, essentially. If you're having lots of injuries, then that's when you really need to have a look at your feet. So if you do have somebody that pronates too much, you might need a bit more motion control. If you have lots of foot pain specifically, you might want to look at those things like Hoka shoes, which have got a lot more cushioning right the way through. There's lots of different brands. So there's basically 5 different things you should have. It's basically the stack height, the drop, as in how high it is versus the front, how flexible the shoe is, whether it's got motion control factors, and then the cushioning side of things. So those 5 factors will determine whether you are a very rigid shoe or a very flexible shoe. And there is a company based in Canada called runningclinic.com, and they've got a huge database. They've got pretty much every shoe that's ever been used in the last sort of 5-10 years, and they've given an index and a score. You can compare, if you like running Nike shoes, you can compare Nike shoes with a similar rating with Asics and New Balance and Adidas, and you can find similar shoes in different brands. So if you're running currently in a pair of Nikes and you want to try to get a slightly lighter shoe and your shoe is scored 60% on their scale, you can find the one that's 55% or 65%, and you can gradually change the type of shoe you've got without too much risk. If you go from a very minimalist shoe, which doesn't have very much support, to a very rigid shoe, or vice versa, those are the real pitfalls. That's where we run into problems. So I think the key thing is, when you're going to buy a new shoe, if you're happy with the one you've got, stick with it. Unless you want to try to get a lot faster, in which case ask the guy in the store which one is the same but it's a little bit lighter, and that's going to help you run a lot more economically. And if you're having lots of problems, well, do your screening with your physio, your podiatrist of the shoe shop, and they'll help you work out whether you're going to benefit from one type of shoe or the other.
Yeah, and I guess if you're just starting out and you're just after a daily trainer and you need a new pair of shoes, tell them that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they always ask you things like that, your history, and There are certain types of shoes which are a little bit more generic and they're not too light or too heavy. They're kind of in the middle. And if you haven't had any experience in shoes, well, that's usually where to start. I think the main thing we have to think about is when you do start using anything, is just doing everything slowly and gradually. Even just walking around your shoes for a few days, first of all, just getting accustomed to them. But if you do too much too soon in a brand new pair of shoes, then you're going to run into problems. The big thing in shoes, obviously, is the new shoes that have been developed over the last 4 or 5 years, the super shoes. These are the shoes that started with Nike. They had a Vaporfly shoe a number of years ago, and it's got basically a carbon plate on the inside with lots of extra foam, and it's basically giving you a bit of an extra spring or a recoil effect. And it's called the 4% because it's predicted to make you 4% faster. And there's been some research on that, and it does prove that you do get about 4% faster. And some studies show a little bit more, some show a little bit less, but there's definitely benefits that do make you run faster. Whether it helps elite runners more or novice runners more, that's still not confirmed yet, because if you're quite new and suddenly you're being sprung for, that might really help you. Whereas elites might not have very much room for further potential. World records are being broken all over the place on the road and on the track. Types of shoes. There's very, very, very little information about whether it's going to cause injuries in the future. So I'd be very, very careful about choosing those if you haven't had some previous running background. They do put you right up on your toes. They do seem to make your muscles in your legs a lot less sore after running. But there's pressure going through your body when you run. It has to go somewhere. The shoe might take some of it, but we don't know yet if it's going to cause injuries. And it's a bit like years ago, they started going for very, very lightweight minimalist shoes with very, very little support. And they became very popular, but it wasn't too long before we realized they were causing lots of stress fractures in the foot. So again, there was benefits of those shoes, and there still are benefits from using them. But if you change things too much too soon, then you're going to run into problems.
Yeah. Okay. Can we move on to gadgets?
Yep.
Rollers, massage. Yep. How do these help us, or what role do they play?
Yep. So foam rollers have been used for a long time. This is a nice way of doing a self massage to yourself. Again, it's one of those things. A lot of people love them. Some people don't. It's one of those things again where what it actually does hasn't really been supportive. It's very hard to prove that it actually stretches things and makes tissue longer, or whether it improves blood flow. It's hard to show those sort of things. I think generally speaking, if you feel that your muscles are very tight and sore, you probably will get some relief from getting a massage or doing some self-massage with a roller. And that's great. And sometimes you need that so that you can actually do the other exercises properly. But if you're in that sort of vicious cycle of relying on your massages and relying on your foam rollers, there's probably something else you need to address. So they definitely have their place. They're definitely useful. If you're running heaps, or even if you run a little bit and you've got a physical job outside of the run you're doing, your muscles might need a bit of help to relax the tension in your muscles and maybe help flush out some fluid in your system that might need to be replenished a bit more. There's definitely a benefit. It's probably more how you feel afterwards that's important rather than actually anything physical it's doing to you. But yeah, if you do feel that you're sort of relying on those things too much, well, there's probably some other thing you could address as well.
Yeah. And what advice would you give for someone who's just starting out? Would you, say target, maybe doing not that park runs available at the moment, but, participating in a park run or coming along to a local event? Is that a good idea to get started?
Yeah, so I think the first thing you want to do is get the right goal. So that's what we do at the start. We're trying to work out what have you done before, how fit do you think you are. Every now and again, we'll see somebody in the clinic who has this bucket list to tick off a marathon, and they've come from nothing and they're trying to run a marathon. And after a while, they actually enjoying the slog every weekend, trying up the Ks every weekend. And you think, well, maybe you should just do a 5K, or just do a park run, or even just go out for a run, just run for a couple of weeks and just sort of see how that feels. And then once you know what you can do, then you can set actual proper goals after that. So just start off doing something to see how it goes first of all. But once you know where you're at, then that's when you can actually set more goals in concrete. But it's always good, I think, to get involved with other people. So joining clubs or even the community groups where people are going out running makes a big difference. You get a lot more help from that. It makes it a lot less arduous going out on your own all the time. And definitely a social thing as well. I think it's a lot more enjoyable, I think.
Yeah, and it's very social as well. I mean, speaking from our Cambridge Athletic and Harrier Club, you know, it's probably more about afternoon tea than it is about the running.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly, yeah.
you know, and as I say, it's very, running can be very much a family affair as well. Your family all runs, my family all runs. And it's something you can all do together, despite the fact of my situation. My husband and my child are far faster than I am, but you know, it is something that you can do as a family. And as I say, very social as well.
Yeah, I think it's sort of you're like almost a role model to your kids when they see you doing the same thing that they're doing as well. I think it's really important they see that. I think it's more important for parents to get involved. I think a lot of parents go along to netball and rugby games and kind of wish they were still out there, whereas with the running community, we can all do it at the same time.
Yeah.
Especially with the Cambridge handicap system, we're all competing for that same prize as well sometimes. We're all running against each other, trying to get to the finish line first, all starting from different starting points. So this makes it much more of a community, fun, enjoyable event.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. And I would say that a lot of running clubs, particularly who have a winter season, would be the same. You know, they're not all scratch races. In fact, very few of them are. And it means that it's very much inclusive, no matter what your level. So, look, if anyone out there is looking to get into running, please consult your physio. Look up your local running club. If you live in Cambridge, obviously we highly recommend that you look up our club. And at the moment, I am also taking Ladies Running Reboot, and we just run around the lake on a Tuesday night. So there's a little plug for that, which is part of our Get Active program as well. So look, Jonny, thank you for your time. Any other piece of advice before we go?
Oh, my main advice to everybody is just enjoy it. That's it. If you're not enjoying it, there's something else you could be doing that's going to either make you better or enjoy it more. So if you're not having fun, you're either trying too hard or you need a bit of help. You need to get a group to help you, or you need to get a coach to help you, those sort of things. It should be fun. Yeah.
And there's definitely lots of people out there to help. All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Ka kite.
Thank you.